Okay, this is John Burroughs, and I'm going to be doing podcast number 12, and I'm sure. Okay, this is John Burroughs, and I'm going to be doing podcast number 12, and I'm sure you've already surmised by the title that we're going to talk about coronavirus. Um, I really argued this over in my head if I even wanted to have this as a subject for a podcast because there are so many different opinions on this whole thing and so many things floating around in the air about what it's about. But I need to say a few things before I give you my opinion or perspective of what's going on with coronavirus. Number one, my stepfather, who was a bit of an asshole, but more than that, he was a merchant seaman for his entire adult life, and he worked his way up to captain. And when you're a captain of a freighter ship, you're responsible for the lives of everyone on that freighter ship. And through my whole life, I was always told, and it was a learned behavior. I have a learned behavior from my father and a learned behavior from my mother, and they conflict with each other. But my father always used to say, in any time I was nervous about something or something was going to happen, he would always say, expect the worst and prepare for it, and then if it happens, at least you're prepared, and if it doesn't, you feel that much more better for having been prepared for it. For an example, I'll give you a couple of examples. There was this kid when I was younger that hated my guts, and he was supposed to be a real tough guy, and I was supposed to be a real tough guy, and we were gonna, for some reason, he just wanted to kick my butt. So a fight was arranged in a friend's backyard where we were going to finally have it out. And because of his reputation, I was scared. I was frightened. I was on the point of panic. But I remembered my father's words, expect the worst and then be prepared for it. And actually, it was fortunate because at this point in time, my dad was at home, and I told him about what was going on. And he said, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Are you guys going to be using weapons? No. Based on size and ability, do you think he's going to kill you? No. Do you think you have a chance of winning? Or I said, yeah. Do you think you have a chance of losing? I said, yeah. He goes, do you think he's going to kill you? And I said, no. He goes, so just expect the worst. Expect that you're going to lose, and then if you do, deal with it because you're prepared for it. And if you win, it's that much better. Make a long story short, we had the fight. We were surrounded on fences in the backyard, and I felt comforted in the fact that I knew a lot of these people were my friends as well as his, and they would break it up if anything dangerous was going to happen. But it turned out we ended up fighting for an hour and a half, and it came to a draw, and then we became best friends. So that's one example. But it doesn't have a lot to do with disease. Another example is my father being a merchant captain. He had to rely way back when on weather reports and those type of things that were going to happen when he was out at sea. Sometimes he had a warning far enough ahead that they never even left port. But sometimes he had to go out, and then there was warnings that this storm may happen. So he had to expect the worst, get prepared for it, so-called like batten down the hatches, make sure everything was in shape, so they were prepared for what they might come through, look at alternate routes if they were possible, in order to protect the lives of his men, himself, and protect the cargo on the ship, because that was his job. Now, he has many stories of expecting the worst and the worst happening, and expecting the worst and being prepared for it, and it didn't happen. I don't know how true all these stories are, But that's kind of the premise I live by. So, with that in mind, I'll give you another example regarding disease. Um, as a kid, I remember getting my shots for polio. I think they gave you shots for mumps. They gave you shots for tetanus. You had your vaccinations that you had growing up. But from the time I was, I don't know, 16 or 17, I mean, the flu was always out there, but there was never some strange disease going on that I knew of until the early 80s when AIDS came out. And that immediately got my thought pattern going, expect the worst based on what we know, and be happy if the worst doesn't come. Well, let's talk about AIDS for a minute. The acronym AIDS means Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome, and then there's HIV, the actual virus. Well, originally, when AIDS first came out, it was thought to be a gay disease only. And so for a lot of people, that brought relief. Unfortunately, not long after, we found out that it wasn't just a gay disease, but it was transmitted through bodily fluids. But when it was thought to be only a gay disease, I was working as a technician for one of the largest telecommunications companies in the state, and I got a repair ticket for a bar called The Answer. Now, The Answer was a notoriously gay bar, and this is when the whole fear of this virus was going on, and also thinking that it was only gay people. So, working for this major utility communications company, they had a book of systems and practices designed to keep you safe on the job, and they had it for everything from climbing poles to anything you can think of. So any threat to your health and safety, you did not have to technically go out and do the job. So I got this ticket for the gay bar, and because we knew nothing about it. I have nothing against gay people, believe me, but when we heard about it, I was deeply concerned, and so I refused the ticket. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going in there because we know nothing other than it's transmitted through bodily fluids and it's primarily a gay disease. So it's a definite threat to my health and safety, and people are dying from it, and I'm not going in there. My supervisor got involved, and he said he was going to, discipline me, suspend me, possibly fire me, all that stuff. Make a long story short, I drafted a letter to the president of the company. And basically that letter said, we have a book, a giant book of the systems and practices that this company runs by. And one of them is we have testing procedures to test power poles. We have procedures to test maybe hotlines. I mean, anything that would keep us safe. And so since we didn't have that, and we knew it was a threat to our health, I wrote this very eloquent letter to the president of the company, and I had everyone in my crew, my peers, that is, sign it. Well, it turned out they came back. The president sent the appropriate manager of that particular department down to our garage, and there was a new policy set that when you were going into a facility that might expose you to AIDS, the basic solution was you wore a surgical mask, rubber gloves, and you had a can of spray disinfectant. Okay, so of course what happened once that policy was put in place, I had no choice but to follow it. Well, of course, the next day I get the same ticket for The Answer. Out to the gay bar I go. okay? And I go walking in there, and there obviously, and once again, this is said without prejudice, there's this big gay guy with, I mean, he was super buffed. I mean, just a super good looking buff guy. And I come walking in, and I have a surgical mask on, and I have rubber gloves on, and I have a can of disinfectant. And he asked me, "What do you want? What are you doing here?" And I kind of pulled the surgical mask away from from my face, and I said, "I'm here to fix your payphone." And he looked at me with disgust. And he said, "Well, what's all this for?" And he goes, "Well, it's because of the AIDS virus." He says, "Get the hell out of here." So then I had to phone up dispatch and this time tell them that the customer refused access to me, which meant my manager had to go out and see it. So that's just some examples of expecting the worst and being prepared for it. So now we have this coronavirus, okay? And like everything else that goes on, and I've said in so many of my podcasts, the human being is always a wild card. There are some of us that are panicking right now. There are some of us that are saying we'll leave it in the hands of God. I guess that depends on what God you believe in. There are some of us that are saying, "Oh, I'm not even worried about it because it's mild." And of course, there's some of us like like me, that's 70 years old, that where it does the most damage, especially if you have pre-existing conditions. And I won't even get into what pre-existing conditions are. But my outlook on the on the coronavirus is this. I was listening to the people that supposedly are most knowledgeable about the virus. And when I was thinking of doing this podcast yesterday, I was putting some numbers together based on the information that I had. That information has already changed from yesterday to today. Okay? And I guess what I'm trying to say is I want to talk about the fatality rate of the coronavirus. And obviously, I'm just going to give you the difference between the flu and between coronavirus and the fact that these numbers may be higher in the elderly, okay? And of course, science needs numbers in order to predict what's going to happen in the future. I mean, we don't know. We already know that our immune systems cannot fight it as of right now. And we already know that the CDC, along with the World Health Organization, is working feverishly on trying to get vaccines or like medicinal treatments that will treat the symptoms and probably avoid a lot of the deaths. But I just want to put this in perspective. First of all, I have a condition called learned behavior that I got from my mother because she was always frightened at the drop of a pin. And I've been controlling that pretty well. Where I live right now, in a county of the state that I live in, according to the county medical authorities, the fatality rate is about 1%. But the World Health Organization just came out today and said worldwide the fatality rate is 3.4%, and when just yesterday it was only 2%. So I want to put that in numerical form for you so you understand that what we're doing here is we're looking at the odds like a gambler would look at the odds. However, we're not betting on horses. We're not sitting at the blackjack table. We're talking about the odds with people's lives. And we're talking about irresponsibility of some people And as much as I am fearful, I'm not running to the store, taking every last roll of toilet paper or paper towels. I'm not running to the store, taking taking a truckload of water. I'm not doing any of those, any of those things. But here's the numbers, how it looks. Okay, the flu traditionally, because we know much more about the flu than we do about the coronavirus, is just under 1% fatality rate. So that means if 100 people have the flu, one person is going to die. If 1,000 people have the flu, 10 people are going to die. If 10,000 people have the flu, 100 people are going to die. If 100,000 people have the flu, 1,000 people are going to die. Okay, so that's the flu. Now, we know, at least the World Health Organization has said the fatality rate globally is 3.4%. Of course, there's different types of countries, depending on whether they're third world or not. But I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to get into strictly the numbers. I'm going to take that 3.4%. I'm going to drop it to 3%. So let's compare it to the flu. So if 100 people get the coronavirus, 3 are going to die. If 1,000 people get the coronavirus, 30 are going to die. If 10,000 people get the coronavirus, 300 people are going to die. And if 100,000 people get the coronavirus, 3,000 people are going to die. So we're using people as poker chips, and science does need the numbers. But I just get so upset about the irresponsibility of some people out there understanding that each life is precious, and we got to avoid being inhumane. And we can't do that entirely, because as long as the human person exists, there's going to be the people that don't give a shit, and there's going to be the people that really care and want to do something about it. And I do take umbrage with some of the people that are flippant. And probably the most famous person right now, based on a tweet that I read, is Trump. And let me tell you about Trump. I don't particularly think he's a guy I'd like to work for. I think he's done a lot of good things, and I think he's done some not so good things. I also think his ego is so huge that he desperately needs the economy to supposedly win the election, which I don't think he really needs that. I think the Democrats don't really, I don't know, they don't really offer a solution. And Trump doesn't really offer a solution. I don't think our present political system offers, or the people in it, offers a lot of solutions. But when Trump comes out in a tweet and says, I don't know, it's just a hunch, but I think it's less than 1%, and the symptoms are mild. They're mild. So, what's everybody worried about? Go to work, Go to work. Don't worry about it. Where the World Health Organization is turning around and saying, pull out all the stops, because we don't know that much about it. So what does pull out all the stops mean? To me, that means doing just that. Not only restricting international travel, restricting domestic travel. Doing the things that are necessary to try and stop this till we know more about it. For all we know, we don't know how fast the cases are going to rise, or we don't know if they're going to sink. But it's that unknown that causes the fear. So until then, pull out all the stops. Don't have domestic travel, public travel. If you have to, use your own car. If you can telecommute, telecommute. Learn to respect and value the life of your fellow human beings on the planet. Don't go out and hoard things. Don't go out and do crazy things. There's enough for everybody, and if history repeats itself, they're going to find a solution, a vaccine anyway, within the next year, year and a half, and they're going to find a medicine which will reduce the symptoms greatly. So for people with upper respiratory problems or whatever it may be, diabetes will reduce the symptoms enough that will drastically cut down on the amount of deaths. So whoever you are out there, whatever God you believe in, if you're going to put it in the hands of God, that's your choice. But I think any God would want you first to do some of the work yourself before that God, he or she, or whoever you believe in, intervenes. So get to work, prepare for the worst, pull out all the stops, and once you're prepared for the worst, what does that do? Answer it for yourself. I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. When you're prepared for something, what does that do? Well, what it does, it makes you more confident in handling it. It makes you less fearful, which will then avoid panic. I could go on, but this is an ever-changing thing every day. But those are my views on the coronavirus. I'm 70 years old, so it does kind of scare the crap out of me. But what scares me more is the way people are reacting my age, and the way unqualified people are talking about a hunch, like Trump talked about. And believe me, I'm not saying Trump hasn't done a lot of good things for the country, but he's got to stop that type of flippant attitude, because people are going to die the less serious and the less prepared we are for corralling this virus and keeping people safe. Okay, John Burroughs, hope this doesn't panic any of you. I would really love to see some views, whether they agree with mine or are opposing. And you know what? I'd really like to see some more subscribers. I'm sitting with one. Doesn't especially make me feel confident about my podcast. But anyway, thanks for those who listened, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.